All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee to review County Board rules to order. A physical quorum of the members is not present. However, pursuant to Section 7E of the Open Meetings Act, members are permitted to attend remotely. Either one member of the committee, the chief administrative officer, or our chief legal counsel are physically present at the regular meeting location. In-person attendance and public comments are allowed, subject to the attendance limitations required to ensure the health and public safety of those who attend. Pursuant to the Illinois Attorney General's guidance to public bodies on the Open Meetings Act during the COVID-19 pandemic, dated July 2nd, 2020, county board members may participate without being physically present in compliance with the established provisions. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Next is roll call, please.
Chaplin, here. Desart,
Here.
Peppa,
Here.
Hart, Selman,
Here.
Zane.
Here.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any public comment?
We do.
I want to make one quick clarification on public comment. I can read them.
They can if they want to.
Oh, you're gonna go for it.
Okay.
One quick thing though, Edgar Pal sent us something for our first meeting. However, there was a drop down issue. It got put into the county board overall notes, but Chair Selman and I agreed that we would read it during this meeting, just to say it was submitted. So just so you know, there is two, and they're both from Edgar Pal, but it's his previous one and this new one.
Okay, beginning the public comments. The first comment is from Edgar Powell, subject public comment for the Ad Hoc Committee to review County Board rules. Comment begins. I am very glad to learn that Chairman Cronin has appointed an Ad Hoc Committee to review the County Board rules. I read the organizational review packet posted online, and I see that the committee is looking at public comment rules from the other Collar counties. I hope that the committee is planning to continue to accept public comment in the same way as it does today. As a resident who works a full-time job, I am unable to travel to the county administration building to attend meetings in person. And this was especially true before the COVID-19 pandemic began. I appreciate that there is an option to submit public comments via the online form so that they may still be read aloud during the meeting as if I am attending in person. This also allows the board to hear the perspectives of a wide variety of constituents who might not otherwise be able to attend meetings in person. Additionally, I hope that the committee will look into other ways to maximize public participation. For example, the committee could ensure that all meetings will continue to be video recorded and posted online. Alternatively, the committee could schedule certain meetings to take place in the evening when more residents are likely to be able to attend in person. Of course, in-person attendance will be feasible only once the pandemic is over, but now would be a great opportunity to think ahead and enact rules that can last a long time. That is the comment. Second comment is also from Edgar Powell. Subject is gender neutral wording. I appreciate the thorough discussion of the Rules Committee held at its first meeting on January 19th. I'm glad the committee is reviewing the rules with such detail and will be modifying the text to ensure that the language is gender neutral. As I expressed to the committee via email, I hope you will also consider changing the name of the board chairman's position to a gender neutral title, reflecting the diversity of our county and the members of the county board. You could look into other counties, for example, as they refer to the same position as a county executive, board chair, or board president. Thus ends the comments.
All right, great, thank you. Next, under Chairman's remarks, I don't have anything specific. I just wanted to thank everyone for the level of contribution we had in our last meeting, and I look forward to continuing that in this meeting and the meetings ahead. As we had discussed at our last meeting as well, we're going to extend the schedule a little bit so that we can make sure we cover all the items and give everything enough time. So just watch for future emails about that. Next up is approval of minutes. So if we have a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, January 19th, 2021.
So moved, Chaplin.
Second.
Okay, any comments, questions, revisions? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Chaplin. Aye. Desart,
Aye.
Peppa,
Aye.
Selman,
Aye.
Zane.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. That is approved. So next up is returning to our discussion on the county board rules. If you guys want to pull up, view the rules packets, and if Jason, we could put up the rules as well. I believe we left off on page 10 on section 4 there, vacancies. The last thing I have that we discussed was that we were going to look into some of our peer counties to see if there's a formal way people resign from those, just to make sure it can be more explicitly included in our rules. But are there any more comments on that section 4 there before we move along? And again, if you're in the room and I don't see you waving, just kind of yell a little bit. All right, hearing nothing else on that section, let's move on to section C here, meeting times. So it starts on page 10 and continues on to page 11. Does anyone have any comments in this section? Okay, I don't see any. Continuing on page 11 then, section E under quorum. I don't think there's any edits there. All right, seeing none, let's move on to section F, committee reports. Does anyone have anything to start there? Yes, member Desart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was reading this. Each standing committee may give a majority report to the county board at a regular, adjourned, or a called meeting. So I was wondering why that's in there. Why? I mean, shouldn't it be, correct me if I'm wrong, each standing committee may give a majority report to the county board at a regular meeting? Why is adjourned meeting or called meeting in there? My point is that if the meeting is adjourned, how would the committee chairman give a report to an adjourned committee or to an adjourned board or a called board? The board has to be there to hear the report, right? So I just would take out the words adjourned or called.
Okay, does our state's attorney have any comments just on that specific language? Because I agree, it does seem kind of clinky.
So the terms adjourned and called refer to a meeting post adjournment or a meeting that has been called as opposed to a regular meeting. So I think that language needs to remain.
A special call meeting, or if we're having a meeting that goes late on Tuesday and we want to continue it to Wednesday, we adjourn and then meet on Wednesday.
As opposed to the regularly scheduled meetings, which are the regular meetings.
Oh, I see.
read that to be
Okay.
Adjourned, an adjourned meeting. And why would a committee chairman or want to give a committee report at an adjourned meeting? But you're saying if it's adjourned and then.
It's technically a meeting pursuant to adjournment. I understand the language could possibly be changed to say that, but it means the same thing in practice. An adjourned meeting is a meeting pursuant to an adjournment as opposed to a regular.
Okay, if you guys think it should be in there, then we'll leave it, but it just looks funny.
Could I ask a question, Ashley? This is member.
Yes, please, member Chaplin.
I'm sorry, going back to the vacancy, could we put in there that a vacancy must be filled by a resident with a, that has lived in DuPage County for at least a year?
Which section?
On the vacancy, where the vacancy is over there, if we can add that for,
Page 10.
yeah, I don't have my page isn't numbered, but yeah, I think it would be nice if we said, that people that are filling vacancies, at least live here a year. A resident of DuPage County for a year.
Okay, member Zay, do you have a comment?
Yeah, but I think when they're talking about vacancies, this part of it, that's for committees. It's not for a board member.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's for
Correct.
standing
So,
committees. It doesn't say like if a
There
board
was-
member were move away or resign or something like that, or pass
Okay.
away. I think it was just specifically for committees, and
Okay,
if something were to happen.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Member Zay.
You can call me Jim.
So- Member Chaplin, your your comment then would be for the appointments, which is on page 4. I know your copy doesn't have page numbers. So maybe that's something because we had already noted that we were going to look and see what the other counties have on their forms. So I think that's an interesting consideration. And then maybe, I know that there's been some objections to that sort of requirement in the past. But I think, yes, let's consider it, but we'll have it on that
Thank you.
section.
Sorry about that, guys. Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, it's okay. All right, so back on page 12, section F. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add under that section? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to section G, budget preparation. I know we had some discussion on this when we were talking about the chairman's responsibilities. Does anyone have any comments here? Yeah, member to start.
Yeah, under G2, I think at the last meeting, we decided to have the chairman submit to the county board the second meeting in September.
Yep, I think that's correct.
Member Zay's suggestion.
Yeah, to line it up with when we actually do it more. Yeah, I
Right.
think that's a good idea. Thank you. Any other comments or questions under that section? Okay. Moving on then to section H here, motions by committee chairman. I assume that's all okay. We're fine with chairs of committees seconding or making their own motions. Okay. Page 13 then. The subpoint there about committee chairmen being able to appoint subcommittees within the jurisdiction of their committees. Is there any comments or questions on that? Yep, member to start.
Thank you. I just thought that under J1, email has now become so commonplace that at the very last sentence, it says in writing or by email, and I would strike the or by email because that's how we communicate now. I just think it's redundant.
Okay. Does our state's attorney think that language has to be specific like that, or do you agree that it could be redundantly kind of cut?
It is somewhat redundant. I'll have to get back to you just to make sure that there isn't some reason that that is in there. But my initial opinion is that it may be able to be stricken. Let me get back to you.
Okay, great. That sounds good. All right, any comments on the section just above there or on point 2 under J? Okay, I don't see anything there. Under K, stipends and additional compensation, are there any comments here? Okay, I don't see any. Section L, parent committees. Let's look at items 1 and 2 there and see if there are any comments. We're moving on to page 14 as well. Anything on those items? All right, I don't see any. So the next section we're moving into is talking about the standing committees. So I want to go through each committee and then with what's written, knowing that we're going to get some edits from the staff that staff those committees, making sure that things line up with the way things actually happen. But I think this part of the conversation also, let's keep in mind that we're considering whether or not we want to keep all these committees, reduce some of them to try to make our schedule a little more efficient. And knowing that this conversation, if we're saying that we want to change a committee or consolidate committees, that doesn't devalue anyone's work. It's simply making sure that we have the right amount of attention being given to the right amount of topics. So the first standing committee to discuss is Development Committee. Is there any comments specifically on anything here as written?
Oh, Member Selman, this is Member Chapman.
Yeah.
Can I just
Please go ahead.
make a comment? So with this revision of rules, the way I look at it, I was thinking they wouldn't take effect until 2022. As far as like if we were to consolidate committees so that we don't, aren't reassigning people right now that already have these committees and chairmanships and all of that. But going forward, that was my thought. But I think if we could change the times in this meeting, in this rules committee, that would be, good for us going forward to change the times if we need some more time. But, as far as anything like, vice chair or committee assignments, I think they should all stay where they're at right now and have this going forward in 2022 when the new board is seated. Those are just my thoughts. So what do you guys think on that? I mean, to just avoid confusion and all of that with what we have right now.
I tend to agree. Is there anyone else who has any other comments on that item?
So, you know, I think we should definitely look at consolidating, but
Yeah, but keeping the slate we already voted on, continuing
Right.
through this term. Member Zay?
Member Chaplin, you just mean standing committees, right?
yes, just standing committee.
Okay.
All right. So any other comments on development committee? I think my perspective is that should remain a standing committee just because of the body of work that they have and its sort of uncommonality with other departments. Does anyone have any other views on that?
Sure, Sullivan.
Okay, so then we'll, oh, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Can I back up just 1 second? I want to clarify, December of 2020 then?
Of 2022.
22, I'm sorry, yes, sorry, 2022.
Right, that's what I think. I mean, I think that would make more sense, you know, because we don't want to have an upheaval here.
Assignments are intact through December of 20.
Yes.
How about the other items
Yeah.
are changing? Are those going to go in place right away or all changes December 20?
I think, don't you think all changes except maybe the time of the meetings, you know, which I think we can set with the chairmans of each committee. I don't even know that that has to be done here.
Yeah.
but Yeah, I would
So
think,
all the wording we talked about so far would be December 20.
I think so, yes. Don't you think, committee members?
I think it might make sense to make a decision on that part after we have the final report and decide what we want the final rules to be, because there might be some things that make sense to change right now that don't really affect operations, but I do agree that if there's things that are correct, exactly, like that's one I think would make sense, but we'd want to check with the chairman's office and senior staff to make sure that was, everyone agreed. But yeah, I agree. The things that are bigger structural changes, we don't want to change in a county board vote and ask everyone to adapt kind of quickly. I think that would be sloppy.
Thank you.
Okay,
I just
very
wanted to
good.
clarify that. Appreciate it.
No problem. All right, anything else on development then today? Okay. Let's move on to finance committee then. Is there anything just in the copy that anyone had any comments on? Yep, member Desart.
Yeah, I think that the first paragraph should include body as a whole. I think that should be mentioned in the first paragraph.
Okay.
Member Desart, we couldn't fully hear you in the room. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. I think that the first paragraph should include body of the whole. Just to let people know
I think that's,
the finance committee is a
Yeah.
body of the whole committee.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I know it's specified earlier when there's a section earlier going through that some are bodies of the whole and some are smaller, but I don't see that as being a problem to make sure it's consistent. Members,
And my
did you have your hand up or, oh, sorry,
my
go ahead, member
comment-
Desart.
Thank you. My other comment to this section is under C. Is there a reason we're at $500,000 for that threshold? Or should it be lower or raised? I don't know. But is there a reasoning for the $500,000 threshold?
Member Chaplin or Nick, do you guys happen to know?
This is actually an addition, not that old, to be honest with you, and it's more as new projects were built on campus, there was the fear that, you know, what does this lead to as far as additional operating expenses? And this was the attempt to at least quantify what those additional expenses would be. 500,000, to be honest with you, nowadays is fairly low, but that's up to the committee where you want to set it at.
All right, thank you, Nick. Member Zay, did you have your hand up before or were you just kind of moving?
No, that was just what Member Desart had said. That had been talked about on page 9, but I have no problem of putting it back in again with being a committee of the whole, a body of the whole, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
And I think we should get rid
One
of
comment
finance.
Get rid of finance?
Get rid of finance.
I did have someone sort of bring up the idea of that our Tuesdays with county board are somewhat silly in that we go through a finance body or meeting that's a body of the whole and then do the pretty much same agenda an hour and a half later. So I was just wondering, do we think that that's an area for some time consolidation? Maybe we could have some explanation of why things need to go through finance and county board to get voted on twice by the same members. If, I don't know if Nick or, again, Member Chaplin, if either of you have any sort of understanding on that, why it needs to go through both bodies.
Yeah. That might be, dive into the state's attorney a little bit more, whether finance is actually required or not. It's a great question, and it's always been done that way, and I'm not sure if there's a reason why.
And do you guys know, because before it was not a committee of the whole, and then it changed to a committee of the whole, and do we know why they changed finance to a committee of the whole? Was it always a committee?
I think it's always,
Has it? Because
I think it's always been a committee of the whole. I don't think everybody showed up, but it used to be held, I think, in this room, other 3,500, and it was expanded because nobody could fit, moved it into there, made it a little bit more official, but I think it's always been. And for some reason, they've always run everything through in the thought process. I think it was that the discussions would mainly happen on finance, the debate, the back and
Yes,
forth.
yep.
And then by the time it got to
The
county
county
board,
board,
it was kind of worked out or pulled
Right.
from the agenda.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think we do have some good discussions about the budget in finance and, you know, especially with CARES funding right now. I mean, it does have some value that, you know, we don't have that in county board. And so, yeah, but it's something, so, and most, I think all the other counties did have a finance committee. So, you know, I think that might be one, you know, I don't know if we want to cut our finance committee for transparency reasons or, you know, people say, why did DuPage County get rid of their finance committee? You know, that is one standing committee I saw in all the other counties. So it might even be required. I don't know, but something to look at with the state's attorney.
I'll look into it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Okay. And then Member Zay.
Yeah, back in the olden days, the finance committee was not a committee of the whole. It was 8 committee chairs, mostly the main committees that were on finance. So it'd be Public Works, Stormwater, Transportation, a few of the other committees before we expanded the committees. It was a smaller committee. And then those people, at that point, it was probably about 12 members. And the other people were like, well, that's only 6 members that were member of finance. It wasn't kind of fair. So I think that's why they made it a committee of the whole. So everybody had a chance to be on the committee and have input. But it was eliminating certain board members that weren't chairman of committees.
And there are some
Back in the old days, before electricity.
Yeah. And then there are some items that do come through finance that don't come through any other committees. So we may have to have a finance committee to put some of these items that fall under finance. We need a committee to bring them through.
So maybe then just the only part that we can explore is with the state's attorney of seeing what the legal requirement is for items that go through both finance and county board and see if there's some agenda consolidation we could do there. But if not, it sounds like this unfortunately probably isn't a consolidation area. Does anyone have any other comments on either that conversation or just other parts of the rules for finance? Okay, so let's move on then to item C, which is Health and Human Services Committee. I think the first comment I want to make and that we've heard others make is I think we need a new name for that committee. Anyone who's sat on there since March of last year knows you get a lot of comments and questions about the health department, but that's not their parent committee. They're a wholly separate entity. I think probably the best way to do that is to ask staff to come up with a couple of ideas, you know, like I'm thinking like Mary Keating and Janelle Chadwick, those sorts of individuals. But if there's any other comments on that or just in general this section, let me know.
I had.
Remember to start?
Yeah,
Oop, and then I'll go to Chaplin.
I would just delete health and just call it the Human Services Community. The other thing I wanted to change on this document is that it's no longer called the Convalescent Center, it's called the Care Center now. So a couple of places where that needs to be changed. And I think those were my comments on this section. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
And then,
Very good catch on the convalescent center. Thank you. Member Chaplin?
yeah, and then if we change it to, I was gonna say to Human Service Committee, then I would strike like health out of every, where that says Board of Health, health and state health, federal health, take all the health out of that, private health, because we're not gonna, we don't really do all of that in that committee. And so if we could strike, anything doing with health, I think that one whole paragraph, E, I think it is, work with the DuPage County Board of Health and other appropriate, and others as appropriate to develop mental health programs. I mean, we transferred that all over to the health department a year or two ago, so I think you can strike that whole letter E from the document.
Okay, I agree. Are there any other comments? Yep, Member Renahan?
Thanks. I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I think residents are very much misled by the name of this committee. So what I kind of had envisioned for this committee, maybe some of the others as well, is just staff to come up with maybe a suggestion or two, and then I would like to take that back to committee just for kind of approval, like to actually use our committee structure that we don't seem to use quite as much as I wish we would, just so we have buy-in from everyone there. And that's all. I'm so
I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Member Renahan. I think that's a really good idea. So for the committees where we're making changes of making sure that goes back to the committees before it comes to a board vote. I'm saying that looking at you, Jason, so you can help us remember that timeline.
Yeah.
And
Andrew and I will work out a timeline for it.
awesome, thank you. And then just for everyone's knowledge, we've asked the staff members to look at these items in the rules, especially for their committees. So Nick has been coordinating that even before the start of the year. So they are definitely aware, but I agree that when we're making changes like that, it should go back to the committee before we have it in our final report. So thank you, Member Renahan. All right, any other comments then on item C? I think we probably all agree too that the body of work in that committee is sort of freestanding and doesn't make sense to be combined with any other. Is that a consensus? Okay. Okay, let's move on to D, Transportation Committee. Member Desart?
Thank you. Yeah, one comment I had about the Transportation Committee is that I'm on the Transportation Committee now. And last 2 years I've been on the Public Transit Committee, and the Public Transit Committee hardly ever meets. There's just not that much stuff we need to meet about. So I would suggest combining transportation and public transit. And while there's a transportation director, we could just have the public transit community partners come in and make presentations from time to time during transportation.
Thank you. I have also thought about that. I think, I formerly served as the chair of that committee, and the staff is phenomenal, and especially the work that they did trying to keep us all up to date with the changes that came through COVID. But I agree, we didn't meet that much because there wasn't a whole lot of activity that needed that kind of attention. Does anyone else have sort of I guess a pro or a con to looping public transit in as maybe a subcommittee of transportation?
Yeah, I think that's, if I may, Member Chaplin, I think that's,
Yeah, please.
I think that's a great idea. You could even have it as a little standing item on the transportation agenda, public transit, and if there's a report to give, then they give it, and if not, then there's nothing to report on, and then you could have it as a standing item under transportation.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Member Zay?
I think you guys are right that we should get rid of public transit and put it under transportation. It used to be, and it got moved out. And there's, just like you said, not enough of a workload to maintain a normal committee there.
Okay. And then what's this section? On page 12 where it talks about the subcommittee. So even if it becomes, we wrap it into transportation, if there's ever a situation, let's say we get a huge infrastructure package from Washington and we have a lot more money, so we have a lot more work to do, the transportation chair could make a subcommittee of public transit for whatever term needed to really dive in on those issues. So I don't want the public thinking that because we would maybe make this not a regular standing committee that we're neglecting those items. We're just, and honestly, it might get looked at more if it's a standing item on transportation. Any other comments on the transportation committee? Okay, welcome, Member Hart. We're on page 18, just so you can follow along.
Thank you.
So then next up, if there's no more comments on transportation, is Judicial and Public Safety Committee. Do you have any comments on this committee? Member Zay?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I've talked to Mr. Cottonmeyer about this last couple of years. I think security should be taken out of JPS and should be put into facilities, because security at our buildings works hand in hand with our facilities people. It just doesn't seem to make sense, them being under Homeland Security. I think we could make that break and move those over to facilities, since they do take care of our buildings and they do work hand in hand already. It just doesn't seem why, it just doesn't make any sense anymore why our security people are under Homeland Security and not under our facilities who take care of our buildings, and I think have a better feeling of what's going on and what needs to be done.
Okay. Nick, I know that we're looking at sort of security needs for the building regardless. Do you think it makes sense to maybe have that conversation as part of that assessment?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously what members A talked about goes beyond the rules we're talking about where security goes. That's more of an organizational, but absolutely we can examine that, and that would be a structural change within how we administer it. But easily we could sit down and talk about that, the pluses and minuses of it.
Descriptive enough, right, for the duties under it? Or if we take that out, is public safety maybe not? I don't know.
Sure, Solomon, there is a few that I know Chair Renahan and I talked about, just updating what's all under, they've changed some of the mental health and drug court is got a different name, a couple things like that I'll add into suggestions just to actually show what's under there now.
Good, okay, I think that's a great idea. All right, if no more comments on JPS, we can move on to Public Works, which gets us to the top of page 19. Are there any comments on Public Works Committee? Yep, Member Desart?
Yeah, thank you. I think across the board, technology works with every department. So I think maybe technology and public works could be combined and not have two separate committees there.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting. Does anyone have any more comments along that line?
Member Chaplin.
Yep, please go.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. So I know I'm probably gonna get what, but what about placing environmental under public works and development? Have it under the two committees. A lot of environmental falls under both those committees, and chairing the committee, we do have a lot of speakers in, which is very interesting, but if I think it could easily fall, maybe fit really nicely into these two groups, and we might even get more participation, similar to placing public transit with transportation. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking maybe, having on development and public works, a standing item for environmental. So just a thought.
All right, I think that's interesting. Member Zay, was that a hand?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, and
One
stormwater
thing
too,
we had,
you could put it under
one thing we had
stormwater.
talked about, yeah, I mean, there's some issues here, and we'll go on the next page also about drainage issues. Actually, stormwater took over drainage a couple of years ago, so I think we need to, make that change and move drainage issues in the stormwater. And what Member Chaplin had said, obviously you could work, some of the, environmental issues for water and that into stormwater also, if that was the feeling to get rid of, the combined environmental into these other committees. I think stormwater could take some of those water issues also.
Yep, I meant stormwater as well. So yeah, so I think you put it nicely, have it as a standing item on each agenda. I think if you make it more efficient.
And then where would we see like their few procurements moving through then? Just under finance? Because like, the scarce contract or the hazardous waste facility. I just want to make sure that
I think
under public work.
Yeah, you could run the hazardous waste facility through that.
Okay. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. So maybe that gets us to cut public transit and environmental. Okay, any other comments here on public works?
Yeah, I just had a question for Member Chaplin. So you said environment could be a standing item on public works, stormwater, and what was the third committee?
Development.
Development, thank you.
Yes. And then just to reiterate, we want to move, as members, they said drainage over to stormwater.
Yeah, let's have notes there to make sure. I mean, I know all the departments are reviewing, but to make sure that those items all get moved over. Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Okay. Any other comments here on public works? All right, let's move on to stormwater. So we've already talked about if we consolidate the environmental committee, having environmental be a standing item on that agenda. Are there any other edits or comments? Yep, sure. Member Zay?
Yeah, what we had talked about, I think we would move there on that page 20, item 6, that's under duties related to drainage, and make that like number 4 under stormwater on their section, and just we could transfer those over. And just so the board's aware, if we do move some of this into, it's always been an issue, if we do move some of these items to stormwater, we are a joint county board and municipal committee. So would the board be comfortable with giving some of those decisions to the municipal members? That's the only thing to think about.
That's a great point. Any other comments on the stormwater section? No, okay, so then let's move. Oh, sorry, Member Desart.
Thank you. Actually, I was just thinking about what Member Zay just said. Maybe then in that case, we leave, if we are uncomfortable leaving environmental issues to the municipal partners, maybe then we just keep the environment as a standing item on development and public works, or maybe just move it into public works and have it just be there alone. What do you think of that, committee?
Okay.
Well, if we're
I do like the sorry, it's Member Zay, if you want to finish your point, and then we'll go back to Member Chaplin.
I understand that. I mean, stormwater only meets once a month. Maybe we just take stormwater issues on the first Tuesday, and then on the third Tuesday, take environmental and drainage issues on those days and put it there if we wanted to. So the 6 county board members would meet on the environmental and drainage issues on the other meeting dates. So you would have 2 meetings, and then that second meeting would only be county board members with drainage and water quality issues.
Are we allowed to do that on committees where we have members that are non-board members?
That'd be for the state's attorney to look into on the county code. I mean, I'm not sure we can do that, but that was always brought up before. When we talked about drainage moving over, we just there used to actually be a drainage committee that never met. So, I mean, we could put some of those duties there where we knew we were okay to do it, but I'm fine with what anybody wants to do.
Okay. And then Member Chaplin.
Thank you, Member Salmon. So just thinking about stormwater and environment, I think they're pretty much connected anyway. So, I mean, I know they have to be, I'm just looking, they have to be in compliance with Clean Water Act, and I know there's other environmental impacts that, you know, the stormwater has on the environment. So I'm personally comfortable having the municipalities have this environment on their agenda, because I think a lot of it impacts them as well. So I don't really see an issue with it, but if other members do, I completely understand it. But I really do think it's important that environment is part of the stormwater committee. I really think if we move it to these 3 committees, I think it's going to really enhance the environmental impact in DuPage. I think it's going to, I just think it's going to be better.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Would you consider maybe moving the committee into public works? So that's where their procurement and those sorts of items that would require a vote would be, so that those are voted on by board members. And then asking stormwater and development to have environmental items as a standing item, so that they can, maybe they invite Scarson to talk about, you know, proper disposal of oil, that sort of thing. Do you think that would be a good sort of?
Yeah, I think it would have to go under development though. So, because right now that's where environmental is with the budget, they're in development.
I see, okay.
So we put it under development and then have a subcommittee on public works as well, and then on environmental, because all 3 of those are connected, you know, development, public works, stormwater. So, but yeah, it would have to go through development, I believe, because that's where their budget is in development.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, do we have any other comments on environmental? No? Okay.
I'm sorry.
So, oh, yeah, sure.
Before we move on, I didn't really get a sense of combining public works and technology. Was the committee in favor of that? Do you see where I was going with that, or?
I do think it's interesting. I think I would want to talk a little bit with Don Carlson, just because I've been chair for 5 seconds. Member Hart, do you have some comments? You're the past chair.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate where member DeSart's head is on this. I would actually favor them staying separate. I know that there's a lot of issues that flow through technology, a lot of procurements that flow through technology. And I think by combining that with public works, it might create somewhat of a bottleneck. I also would like to get Don's points of view on this as well. But at first thought, you know, I'm happy to think about it a little bit more, but I would probably favor keeping it a separate committee, given that their scopes are different and the amount of procurement activities that go through each of those.
The other item that you just reminded me of, so technology is another one of those committees where other elected officials are on it besides board members. So we have the clerk of the circuit court, we have the sheriff, and a few other offices. I remember we had talked about adding our clerk's office to that. So that they wouldn't then have input if we moved it to public works, which I think would not make many of them very happy. So if I think about, you know, the tax system that we're working on, I know Treasurer Henry is incredibly involved in that because it directly impacts the day-to-day in her office. But I do think it's worth looking and maybe seeing what other counties are doing, how they get their technology items through, and maybe there's just at least some efficiency we could pick up there. I definitely think it's worth looking at. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, if we're all good, we're going to move on to public
Solomon, the
transit.
state's attorney,
Oh, yeah.
has a comment to make.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so on page 9 of the rules, under section 2E, with regards to your question as to whether or not there can be non-board members on the Stormwater Management Committee, it's actually already addressed here. It states that pursuant to Illinois law, there shall be a committee member from each board district as well as one municipal member from each board district on the Stormwater Committee.
So we probably couldn't have meetings without the municipal people because
Correct.
the statute says they have to be on. Okay, that makes sense.
Isn't that like the water commission?
What was that?
Gotta take off my mute. Isn't that like the water commission?
Same
It has
way,
to have-
yeah, same setup. That's through legislation that it calls out who the members are. One member appointed per county board district by the county, and then one appointed by mayors and managers per county board district.
Okay. All right, so moving on to public transit. our general discussion has been moving this to be into the transportation committee. Maybe ask that it be a standing item on their agenda for updates from the partner agencies. Is there any, I guess, opposition to exploring how that would work, or further comments or questions? I agree with Member Chaplin. I think this is one of those examples where even though we're consolidating it and it won't be a standing committee, I think it might actually get more eyes and more ideas paid attention to this topic. So I think that would be, at least that's my perspective. All right, no further comments on public transit then. Let's move on to technology. So we're going to review how technology is done at other counties to see if there's a little bit of just efficiency maybe that we're missing. And then as a reminder, this committee has members from other elected offices within the county so we can collaborate and try to be as efficient as possible. Are there any other comments or questions about the technology committee? Yep, please.
Thank you, Chair Salmon. The only thing, I just want to make sure that we do get the clerk's office, that they're represented on this committee, because they really want to be on this committee, because during elections, they probably use the more technology than any other department, so they would really.
I think our next step on that was just to make sure we can, because of the balance, because it would go from 6 board members and 6 electeds to 7 electeds. And if, like, just seeing what we can do to make that work. I agree that the clerk clearly has a stake in technology and I think is a necessary voice to make sure that her opinions are getting involved with everyone else's. But we're looking into like the legality part. Member Hart?
Yeah, I agree with having the clerk on, but I think I raised this at the last meeting. The way that it's currently written in the rules is that there's all the countywide elected officials, and then the chairman appoints a certain select group of those to serve on the technology committee. So if we're going to have the clerk as a standing member, we just also probably have to think about what other countywides are standing members. From at least from my perspective, it doesn't make sense to just have one countywide elected official as a standing member, and then the rest are appointed from an ad hoc basis. So just wanted to raise that, and I think we can think more about it. But in spirit, I'm all for the clerk participating. I just think we need to be consistent.
Be consistent. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. All right, any other comments on technology committee? No? Okay, so let's move on to strategic planning. Are there any comments on this section? Members? Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. As far as strategic planning, I think we could either remove this committee or make it a ad hoc committee that meets every 5 years. We just did our strategic plan committees. Each committee has been going through their strategic plan on their agendas, updating, where they are in the strategic plan. And I know some board members are like, we don't want to meet just to meet. So I really think we can kind of make this like an ad hoc or a committee that meets every 5 years, something along those lines. I don't know, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Member Desart?
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that every department should have their own strategic plan, as we heard the strategic plan just this morning in transportation. And I don't think this committee has been doing any strategic planning necessarily. So I think we can just delete this committee. I agree with Member Chaplin.
All right, any other comments? My suggestion, I think maybe would be, I think it's an important thing that we have specific points at which we are reviewing this, but I agree that every other committee reviews their strategic plans. There are other committees that meet annually. I wonder if this could be one of those where it's a committee of the whole county board sits down to go through these strategic plans and give direction. But I agree that maybe this one doesn't have to be a standing committee that's on our radar all the time. Does anyone have any other comments about that before we move on?
Excuse me.
Oh yeah, Member LaPlante?
Yes, thank you. I just put a comment in the chat regarding this committee. I am on this committee and I just want to make sure that the scheduling has shifted apparently. And so it was scheduled during, when I already had other committee meetings. So if we can please make sure that somewhere in the rules, and then also specific to this committee, it is not scheduled in conflict with other previously scheduled committees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, member of the plant. And it's probably somewhat my fault that happened. I think maybe my eyes are the ones who should have been on that scheduling, but I agree we should not do that. It makes it quite impossible for you to do your job. Member Hart and then member Desart.
Yeah, just real briefly, I tend to agree with, I think, my fellow members' comments on strategic planning. The one thing to somewhat play devil's advocate is there is value in having a group or a certain select committee consider the organizational strategic plan for the whole county, right? Which is, I think, the mission for this committee. Every department does have their own strategic plans, but there needs, in my opinion, to be a body to sit through what our organization's strategic priorities should be. I agree, Member Selman, maybe that isn't, a quarterly meeting, maybe it's an annual meeting, but I just wanted to get the group thinking about that because I do think there's value to this committee. It's just a matter of, the cadence, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. And then member Desart, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to get consensus to see if people agree that this committee should go away. I mean, strategic planning is so important, but that's not what this committee has been doing. It's not been doing strategic planning. And
So I think I would,
oops, sorry. And so we should have every department just do their own strategic plan.
I think I would be in favor of like a once a year or twice a year, because I agree with member Hart that having sort of an overlooking sort of perspective is helpful because we rightfully ask all our department heads to have their heads into their own work. But I think there's definitely consensus that this doesn't need to be a standing regular committee, that it needs to be a little more purposeful. Remember your chaplain, did you have another comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Selman. Yeah, my only comment was that I agree. I like the idea of meeting once a year. But then again, like I said, I think maybe every 5 years or so, we should have like an ad hoc committee that goes through our strategic plan because it may change. We have new board members, things like that. But again, I don't think we need to be meeting just for the sake of meeting. And I do think a strategic plan is a valuable tool. And that's why I said, I think maybe every 5 years, like I said, right now we're going through the strategic plan that we did a couple of years ago, making sure we're meeting our initiatives. So, every 5 years you have an ad hoc committee, but I think, having a once a year meeting through those 5 years is a great idea, just to make sure we're all on board.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, actually. Does anyone have any opposition to that idea of a 5 year, just making that part of our rules that every 5 years this county is reviewing our strategic plan in a purposeful way?
Okay.
No?
Member Salmon, just
Yes, please.
quick, another thought, we could do it under finance. And as long as everybody's there and we can update them once a year on the strategic plan or something, like that. So we're not having more meetings necessarily. And then, but then still keep that 5 year, I think ad hoc group would be a nice thing. And then have a strategic plan update and, each department or whatever can update us on how they're doing at that annual finance meeting or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments on strategic planning before we move along?
I agree with member Selman. I'm sorry, member Chaplin, that we should have it as part of finance.
Great. Okay. So then next up is our Economic Development Committee. Are there any comments here? Is member Chaplin, I think your hand's up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So since I've been on the board, I've been thinking about Economic Development Committee and Choose DuPage, right? So we have Choose DuPage, which is our economic engine for DuPage County. And then we have an Economic Development Committee. I kind of look at them as duplication. And so my thoughts with economic development is to get rid of the Economic Development Committee. Workforce reports could go right under the Human Service Committee, kind of where they belong, because that kind of falls under workforce, human services, community development, all that type of thing. And then have maybe Greg Bevelot from Choose DuPage come in and give quarterly updates to the board, either county board or finance, as far as economic development. Because again, I think it's redundant. I don't know that we necessarily, most of the things that come through economic development are those workforce resolutions. And, like I said, I think those can easily go under the Human Service Committee and report there. And like I said, bring Greg in every quarter to report to the county board on the economic development status of DuPage. And we could still have a board member serve on the Choose DuPage board and on the Convention Visitors Bureau board, but just eliminate this one committee. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, are there other comments? I guess my sort of just knee-jerk reaction is that as an elected official, I want to be as involved in economic development as possible. Not that I don't think Greg Betelov's a fantastic partner, but I kind of like that they're a little more responsible to us. And I think the value of that was seen just sort of in the last, where are we now, 11 months with COVID, and how much they helped us administer some of our programs that we were able to get off the ground so much faster than our collar counties. But worth considering. Does anyone have any other comments on economic development?
Member Solomon, may I make a comment?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I would like to just point out that I do believe we should be looking into other areas for economic development, meaning not only holding that board being the one organization thought of as economic development. And for example, what I mean specifically is the arts. What I'm noticing is we don't have anything on the county board that focuses on the arts. And so I know I'm sort of bringing this up out of, these are connected is my point. I would like to focus on using the arts in DuPage County as a form of economic development. And I don't see that anywhere. So that's something that I really would like to look into. I'm happy to do all the legwork, whatever needs to be done. But I want to bring that forward in terms of rethinking how we approach economic development on the DuPage County Board. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member LaPlante. Member Hart?
Yes, thanks, Member Solomon. I actually agree with what Member LaPlante said. I think the art community is definitely important, and I know some of the activities we've taken over the last year, it was very, at least with regards to the arts community, is very similar to how we manage that Choose DuPage program. So I want to step back to what you said, Member Solomon. I actually agree with you completely. As a board member, I actually think there's few issues that are as important to what this county is going to have to go through in the next couple of years as economic development. I agree that I think having Greg Betelov participate more outside of this meeting is something I would support, but I actually think there's a lot more this committee can be doing, and it already has a pretty substantial workload if you think about all the different programs that we've done just over the past year. So I personally think that it is valuable to stay the way it is with regards to it being a standing committee. And the other thing, just more broadly, I mean, I'm all for consolidating committees. I think that's something all of us can agree on, but I just want to be intentional about how we do it. There's, if we're consolidating committees that currently have value just for the sake of putting it into finance or public works, I think, as long as they're providing value right now, there may not need to be a reason to consolidate them. So just food for thought as we go through, but I support keeping this as a standing committee.
All right, thank you. Any other comments here on economic development? No? Okay, great. Next is the redistricting committee. So a lot of this committee is prescribed by Illinois statute. It's also one, obviously, many of us don't have experience on because we do it every 10 years. Member Zay, I think if you had any comments, we'll probably start with you. Otherwise, I don't know if anyone has any comments here.
Well, no, I think we just need to talk to the state's attorney and make sure all of the laws that are cited here are correct. And again, it just meets once every 10 years. I guess we have to have it in our rules. But again, just make sure that everything that is written here is actually following, it hasn't changed over the 10 years before that it was put in.
All right, yeah, I think that's a great idea. All right, any other comments on the redistricting committee? Member Hart?
Sorry, yeah, just more of a question. I do want to know what's guiding us in terms of how these committees are populated and formed. Obviously, we need a redistricting committee, but I know we have some internal rules about how certain members get to serve in each of the districts. Is that based on state law, or is that a rule that we can review?
I think that's our rule. I think it's we can review it.
Okay.
So
The
the
only reason
process by which each district picks their members? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think that process is, that makes sense to me, but I would actually support having the whole board, similar to what we do for other communities, or committees, vote on the final committee formation. I don't think I did see an email with the full committee, and I know from my own experience in District 3, there were situations where board members were talking to each other, and I actually didn't know who the District 3 board rep was until I saw who was on the email. So I would support actually this coming through to the full county board for validation and ratification.
Okay.
Member Chaplin, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Selman. And well, I understand Member Hart's concerns, but especially in this committee, I think it's really important that the district representatives pick their representative on this committee, because it is county business, but it really impacts the each member of that district. So I kind of like the districts picking it. I don't want like a gerrymandered redistricting committee, basically, or you know what I'm saying. So I think having the district reps pick their own member representing them, I think that's a fair way to continue on with the redistricting committee. Those are just my comments.
Okay. Member Hart?
Yeah, and Member Chaplin, I'm not unopposed to that either. I just think there needs to be some level of transparency with who is serving. Right now, there's no rules requiring the 3 district board members to talk to each other. As I mentioned, in my case, that was something that happened, and I didn't know who our District 3 board member was serving on that committee. So I'd just like there to be a little bit more transparency and have that built into the rules.
So I think maybe if maybe the part you're more concerned about, and I see members, I'll come back to you after, is how the person on the committee works with the rest of their district. So whether or not we have rules about, I don't know, that one I agree with you. I just know it's tricky, right? Like, how would we enforce, has your district members shared?
Right. And that, oh, sorry, Member Sullivan, I apologize.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say that's kind of why I support at least the final product of who is selected in each district coming to the county board for validation. I agree with you. It's tricky to enforce, but that is one way to ensure that there's transparency and governance over the process. Just my 2 cents.
Okay. Member Zay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I sent it out to the board members. I just assumed they had all talked to each other. Maybe that's my fault that, I got an email from each district stating, the member who was selected, stating, I will be serving on the committee. So, that's my fault, I guess. I just assumed everybody talked to everybody. So, that's probably my fault. I should have followed up more with all the members of the district and make sure they had been contacted and had been in contact with each other. So I take responsibility for that. That's my fault. I should have followed up better on that.
Member Hart, do you think if we just added a line after it goes through the elected by the majority of the 3 districts, that the chair will then report to the board, the members comprising the committee? Do you think that might be good enough for at least the time being?
Yeah, as long as there's a level of transparency built in, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to raise it, and I would be amenable to that solution, Member Solomon.
All right, any other comments on the redistricting committee?
Oh, just Member Selman.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, where it says that, maybe we should talk to the state's attorney and, the word shall might be put in there. So in case of where, the 3 board members shall talk to each other, forcing them. I mean, we can codify it maybe, in that line and rewrite it a little bit. So the three members talk to each other. I know I will not be here in 10 years, so whatever you want to do in that timeline would be good. But yeah, anything that we could do to make sure that it is selected and they all do talk to each other. So some kind of legalese in there, shall or must or something like that, that could really spell it out for the future.
All right, I think that's a good idea to add that to the list of things our state's attorney is reviewing for us. Any other comments on this section? Yeah, Member Hart?
Yeah, just real briefly, I agree with what Member Zay said, and members, I appreciate that sentiment. Thank you. I'd support.
All right, any other comments here? Okay, seeing none. And I do want to just sort of note we're at 2 o'clock. I'm thinking we go to 2:30 and do a stop, if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah, do 2:30 and do a leave. So I'm leaving at 2:30.
Okay. All right, we'll be done before then. All right, next committee to review is Animal Care and Control Committee. One, that name probably needs an update, right?
Yeah, I believe on what Member Desart sent me on her updates, she had changed it to Animal Services, which I think is what we've been calling it. It's just not codified like such.
Okay, yeah. Member Desart, do you have any other comments?
I did. It is called
Please go
Animal.
ahead.
It is called the Animal Services Committee now. I'm sorry, can we just go back to the previous paragraph about the redistricting committee? And this is for the state's attorney. I don't know if it's a statute or not, but should we have that on the very last paragraph of the redistricting committee item, G, letter G, it says the board shall no later than May 1st. Should we keep that in there even though we know that that's not going to happen, or do we have to have that May 1st deadline in there even though we're not going to make that this year?
I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, that is codified in the Illinois code. So I don't think that date can change at this time.
Correct. That needs to stay the same. Exactly.
Okay, and I know it's on the legislative agenda that we're trying to move that date for this year because we know we're not going to get the information by that date, the census information, right?
Right.
At least that's what the Census Bureau is saying at this time.
All right, thank you. I just wondered if we needed to keep the date in there even though we know we're not going to hit that date. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Desart. So for Animal Services, we're changing the name. Or really just updating the name to what it is. Are there any other comments in that section? No? Okay. Let's move on to Intergovernmental. So this is another one of our committees where it's split membership between board members and municipal partners. And they're either mayors or village presidents or village managers. Are there any comments on this committee?
Chair Solomon, if nobody else does, I actually have one from Cheryl Marquet, a quick comment.
Yep.
On the
Sure.
first paragraph, it says right now that the county board member and then the mayor and village presidents, their managers conference, they alternate as chair and vice chair. That she suggested that they just be called co-chairs and stop with the alternation.
I think that's right, and how it's been done in practice. So I think that's a good idea. At least last term and this term, it's been co-chairs between the county board member and Mayor Craig. I think that's a good idea. Any other changes or comments? No? Okay, great. Next is, and believe it or not last, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Committee. Are there any comments here?
Member Chaplin.
Yep, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the Legislative and Governmental Affairs Committee, just throwing it out there, do we think this should be a committee of the whole? Would it be too hard to get everybody together for this? Sometimes I think it's important that all district members weigh in on some of these items in legislative committee. but it doesn't necessarily have to be, but that would be just my one thing. Maybe consider making it a committee of the whole. That's all.
Member Desart?
Yeah, I agree with Member Chaplin. We're having speakers come in, like our lobbyists come in. We're having legislators come in to speak to us. I think the whole board would enjoy hearing our guest speakers. That's number one. Number two, I think under B, it should say develop and publish the county's annual legislative agenda, which is perfect, and distribute it to legislators within DuPage County. I think we should add that part because it's great to publish an agenda, the agenda, but let's distribute it to her. I think Cheryl Marquet already does that anyway, so let's add it in there. And my third comment is the title of this committee is a little bulky, so I would move to strike and government affairs and just call it the legislative committee.
Okay. Does anyone have any further comments?
Member Selman?
Yeah, Member Chaplin?
Thank you, thank you. So, and my thought of, I thought this should be a committee of the whole is because, we do take a lot of positions on legislation, opposing or supporting House bills, Senate bills, things like that. So, instead of one board member from that district voting on, those items, I thought maybe, everybody would want to weigh in. But if it's too cumbersome to have that as a committee of the whole, I don't know if other board members feel that way, but I just feel some of the decisions that we make in there are important. And, maybe it should be a committee of the whole, but that would be up to the rest of the board, going forward. So just my thoughts, but thank you.
Thanks. I do think one thing that would help is if we are getting rid of some committees, our scheduling will be a little better. I know in my previous term, I had a hard time really ever making this committee because of the scheduling. And that stinks. And I think we saw the impact of that just recently when Member Desart had a really great speaker lineup for us and we just had business that ran over, so we missed that. Although I know you want them to come back and I'm sure they will. So I do wonder if just the spacing out will help a little bit so everyone can attend if they want to weigh in. But yeah, no, I think I agree that all of us should be participating and considering those items.
And just, excuse me, one more thing. And this committee doesn't meet every month. We don't meet all year. So we meet, in the early beginning of this year, maybe into the early spring, and then maybe in the fall again, maybe. So it's not like it would be every month we'd have a meeting, to attend. So just something to think about. That's all. So thank you.
Member Selman?
Thanks. Member Desart.
Oh,
Oh yeah. Let's do Member Desart and then Member LaPlante.
Perfect. Thank you. The other comment that I had about this is under number 3, limitation on activities. It says no members of the county board shall lobby on behalf of the county without consent of the county board chairman or a majority of the county board. And I just think this is really vague. It doesn't say what the consent looks like. I know that Member Krajewski and I spoke with, Rep. Kipowitz several times, State Senator Linda Holmes several times about puppy mills and animal issues. And I didn't have a written consent or anything from the chairman saying, here, go to speak to these legislators, but we were still doing the job of the county. So I just think this is vague, that last paragraph. Thank you.
Okay. And Member LaPlante.
Thank you so much, Member Selman. I was just wanted to say something piggybacking on your comment about the scheduling and how it's a little tight and like what happened with Member Desart's committee, how it ran over. I've noticed that myself for several committees, and I feel especially bad for the staff who work so hard and have so much information to disseminate, and then they sound like, auctioneers, how fast they have to talk and move through all of that very, very dense information. Is there a way, and I've spoken to some other county boards, like for Lake County, and they do not have end times. They don't schedule their committees back to back like that. So they let their committees sort of have a more natural end. I'm especially concerned about any committee that has to do with COVID relief, because obviously that's where the bulk of our work is right now, the most important and the most vital. And I'm wondering if we can make sure to have a little bit of wiggle room built around those specific committees about disseminating funds and all the tons of extra work that the staff is having to do. Thank you.
All right, Thank you. I think that's a good idea too. All right, any other comments on legislative, which is the last committee on our list here? No? Okay. So let's see. The next section, I think this is kind of a nice breaking point before we move on to the next section. So it gets a little, the shift of it changes. So unless there's any objection, I think this is a good stopping point. Yeah, Amber, to start.
I think as we talk about
Yes,
consolidating,
please.
I think as we talk about consolidating these committees, this would be a great place to ask, are there any committees that we think we should add to our work list?
Sure. I think it's a good time to have that conversation. Do you want to start? It seems like you have an idea.
I don't, but this is a great place to ask
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Ideas?
Member LaPlante, do you want to?
Yeah, you saw that, right? I love that, Member Desart, and I really think something for the arts and DuPage. It's kind of shocking to me that we don't have any budgeting, any committees, anything set aside. And that, that starts obviously in the school system and all of that. So anything having to do with the arts.
And the arts related to economic development?
That's exactly right. Yes, thank you very much. So that could be part of the arts committee, would be economic development specific. A lot of other counties are really focused on that, and it really does. I've had meetings with Choose DuPage, DCVB, Arts DuPage, and DuPage Foundation. Everyone is interested in this. So I think that this is something that we can really tap into. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I think I had Member Chaplin and then Member Hart.
Thank you. So, yeah, and I do agree the arts are very important. They're a great way. They do add a lot of economic value to DuPage County. Now, we do have that committee that a board member serves on. It's the DuPage Arts Council, is it? The DuPage?
It's the Arts Foundation.
Arts Foundation.
Arts DuPage.
Arts DuPage. So would we be duplicating their work? Would we be, are they because I know just from being the president of the Midwest Ballet Theater for many, many years, we worked with the DuPage Art, I think it was Arts Council at that time, or where they gave grants to people, choral societies, orchestras, ballet companies and things like that to help us promote our performances and things like that, and to bring people to the area. So and I do know, like I said, we do have a board member on that. So just wondering if there would be any overlap with a county committee doing the same work as the Arts Council. I don't know. That's just something to look into. Maybe staff can look into that.
I can answer some of that, Member Chaplin. I've been having a lot of meetings with Arts DuPage, and it is a very separate entity. And Member Rutledge is not sitting on that board as a county board member. So they do not have a board position for county board or any other elected officials. So I'm being onboarded, but it would be as an individual citizen, just as someone, obviously who's a performing artist, but not as a member of the DuPage County Board. So they really do try to keep it very apolitical, I should say. So instead, the way I would look at it is this would be, we already have 3 organizations that, we all just mentioned off the top of our heads that we could work in conjunction with, but none of them have access to funding, which is what we would bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Hart?
Thank you, Member Selman. So just to piggyback off the last conversation about the arts, as I mentioned, I agree with Member LaPlante. Perhaps this is something that we can build into the portfolio of the Economic Development Committee. I think it was Member Rutledge that said on the board floor a couple months ago that arts are a major driver of our economy locally here, and that was increasingly clear during COVID. So maybe similar to how we have a Choose DuPage and DCVB update in economic development, we can add an Arts DuPage update there if we think it makes sense to merge that into that committee. So that's my first thought. The other thought, just more broadly, for other topics that we might want to review as part of the committee structure. I know currently, actually previously, Member Solomon, I know you and I worked together on really thinking through our own county, our county administration's approach towards, recidivism and recruitment, and a lot of different workforce issues. Right now, I believe our HR department reports up through through finance. I'd actually be open to thinking about whether or not that should be, a standing topic within finance, or maybe that is merged with technology to form a shared services committee. I think that's only going to get increasingly important for our board to be at the forefront on as we head into future years. And, we want to continue to recruit and retain the best talent for the county. So that was one thought I had, and I wanted to raise it here.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Either as a standing item in finance or adding it to technology. I think both are really interesting. I think particularly I almost think the technology one's more interesting because talking about shared services, I feel like that's very much the way that bureaucratic organizations are going. So, okay. Any other ideas for topics that deserve attention that maybe we're not giving enough to? Members A?
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking about the arts, on page 27, we do have other advisory bodies where it says the chairman may create. Maybe we have it the chairman or a majority of the county board members may create a special advisory group. So something like the arts where we could get board members serving on it, but also members from the community that are involved in the arts in different areas. Or if a board member like Member LaPlante felt that strong, we would say, okay, great. How do you want to do this? And she could say, I need 3 board members and I need, these groups to report there. And we could set something up like that. If that's what she wanted, so we can get outside people to come in and actually be a part of it and give us some guidance on it.
Great, I think that's interesting too.
I love that, Members A. Thank you.
All right, so are there any more comments really through this last item here before we sort of put a stopping point in our discussion for today? All right, let me get my agenda back up here. All right, so next item on our agenda then is old business. Does anyone have any old business? Members A?
Yes, thank you. I just think, I know we're going through this right now, but I think we really need to take a quick look in the future for public comment. I don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to keep coming. And I think we need to figure something out. I think there was some good discussion at the last board meeting. Maybe something where we allot 30 minutes for in-person time for public comment and 30 minutes for emailed public comment. So if we only had 4 or 5 people that showed up and they went 20 minutes, that's what we would allot, 30 minutes, and then, 30 minutes for emailed comments. And then, like we had asked, if we get, 150 comments, that those be, deciphered and broken down by topic. So we know, once we get to that 30-minute, time limit, then, they can opine saying, we have, 42 more people who object to this, 45 people who are in favor of it, and then things that are not in the topics at all that we don't think is in our purview, maybe those are not even read. Those are like given to us, as a side note saying, and then we had 10 people who wanted to say, we didn't, recognize National Donut Day or something like that. I don't know, something that would, break it down, because it is getting monotonous and our rules are very, it says 30 minutes, but I know we all feel like we should, give more time to it, but we can't give all day to it either. That's part of the problem. We have business we have to do. And I just think we need to come up with something in the next few months. I mean, probably less than that, so we can, not have these discussions on the board floor and, have people, again, taking a bad vote. They don't want to, stop public comment, and the people don't feel like your views are being expressed. So I think it's something we need to look at and come up with a solution quickly.
Thank you, Members A. I could not agree more. I think over the last 2 or 3 meetings, I've written down 9 or 10 different ideas that people have brought up to make this a little more efficient. And it will be on our next chunk. Public comment rules are on page 28. So we are getting there quickly. Member LaPlante and then Member Desart.
Just to piggyback on what Member Zay said, and if we could just come up with a, to address the issue of cameras on or cameras off during public comments. I've noticed that a lot of the cameras go off, and I don't think it's a great look for when our constituents are talking to us that there's sort of a mass exodus. I understand having to, you know, turn the camera off for a quick break, but maybe that's something that can be addressed. So we have a full board consensus on how to approach that. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. We've talked sort of just generally about some codes of conduct for members when they are in remotely. We have obviously some standards for our staff that they have to have an ability to be working in a place where they're not caring for children or running other businesses on the side. And I think we should at the very least meet those same standards. But I agree that when your camera is on and when you can turn it off should probably be explicitly noted. Further comments under old business. Member Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. And I am in total agreement with Member Zay about the public comment, and maybe at our next committee, if we meet next week, I don't know if we're going to meet next week, but just have it on the agenda, public comment. And then, you know, I think the 30 minutes of in-person and 30 minutes of online comments would be a great rule. And then, you know what, let's publicize it so people can give comment about our public comment. So we're not trying to leave the public out, make it transparent that we're going to be changing our rules. And I know farther down in the rules as a parliamentarian, but I think maybe we could hire a parliamentarian and then they could keep the time and they would be the one to tell the people, you know, the person to stop talking. And that way it's not an elected official or a state's attorney or somebody telling, you know, the resident that your time is up. It's a neutral person, you know, that's saying time is up, we move on to the next person. So I think for future going, possibly hiring a parliamentarian to make sure we're following the board rules and to keep us on time with those comments might be a, you know, something to look into. But I'd like to see that public comment discussion on our next meeting so we can get that done sooner rather than later.
I nominate member
Thank you.
Dessert.
I agree. It's a good
Time.
idea.
You know, and in fact,
Yes, please go ahead, Member Dessert.
thank you. I was supposed to go after LaPlante, but whatevs. I agree with members.
Oh, sorry.
I have been timing people, and we're allowing people to go 5, 6, 7 minutes, and that is not an efficient use of our time or their time or viewers' time. And I'll tell you, I've spoken before other public bodies. Naperville City Council, for example, about a year ago, they cut you off at 3 minutes. Somebody says your time is up, your mic goes off. And that's the kind of watchdog we need at the county board. And I think members, they should do that. Your time is up, your mic is off, period. Thank you.
All right, so I think thank you. Thanks, and sorry, Member Dessert. I very much agree that our next agenda, we would cover the public comment section anyway, just through our the progression of the packet here, but I agree with let's explicitly call it out. So if we have public ideas on it, I want to hear those. And the parliamentarian conversation will be in this next section as well, and I agree we need to dig into that. All right, any other old business? Any new business? All right, I move that we adjourn. Can we get a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Oh, I'm coming. Lost my page.
No worries.
Selman,
Aye.
Day,
Aye.
Chaplin. Aye. Dessert,
Aye.
Eckhoff,
Aye.
Hart.
Aye.
All right, all ayes. Thank you. Thanks, Greg, or Member Eckhoff. Glad we were able to get you out before your 2:30. See everyone next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.